User in your channel started recording.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Whispering Dawn podcast. As usual, we are a weekly Final Fantasy 14 podcast that is live every Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Twitch TV. Well, twitch.tv Whispering Dawn if you want to get technical. You can find us on iTunes and Stitcher. If you do go to iTunes, please leave us a rating. It helps us get seen by other people. It is a good way to support this show. Another way you can support the show is by going to patreon.com, Whispering Dawn, and leaving at least $1. And after this episode, we got a special treat for our live audience. We will be doing the Patreon podcast thingy, sidetrack thingy that we're doing live for them as a special treat so they can see what we're doing for the Patreon episode sidetrack thingy. So that'll be awesome.
Is that going to be the name of the series now? Sidetrack thingy?
No, I think it's just going to be called Sidetracks.
What about side questing?
Ooh, that sounds better. You can also contact us at our email account at thewhisperingdawn@gmail.com. You can hit us up on Twitter at whispering_dawn. We also got a Facebook account, a Tumblr account, a YouTube account. All Whispering Dawn for all that stuff. So that's the easy stuff. As usual, my name is Kasumi Rylith, and I got 3 amazing ladies today, and one of them is guest starring with us tonight. First, we got them. I still can't pronounce your last name here, sorry. Damn, hello, you there?
I am here. I'm sorry, my push to talk button was not actually working. Go with
Alright, Demi Praycox.
Hello.
And we also got our fabulous streamer and / just awesome person in general, now Celestine.
Hello, everybody.
And all the way from the Gather Together podcast, and from actually, was it Heidelin Live? I can't pronounce her name, so you can introduce yourself.
I usually go by Yelta Sumasu. So yeah, I was on SBXIV, Heidelin Live, and now Gather Together.
Well, welcome to the show.
Indeed. Now I just need to get one more member from the Gather Together, and I'll have a full set.
I nearly, promised goodies of some type. I was going to try to get my sister. But she was busy today, so.
Oh, well, we'll take it out of her in Triple Triad card pain.
Speaking of Triple Triad, guess who decided to venture into the Golden Saucer?
Demi, you finally went into the Gold Saucer?
No, I didn't. With my right hand, that doesn't work.
Oh.
I'm sorry to disappoint you and let you down. I genuinely am, but I will some.
I don't know then.
The correct answer would be one Kasumi, who's been, for the last couple weeks, been saying, I've never been there.
Well, you finally set foot there. So what did you think?
User in your channel is recording.
It is huge, I will say that.
And it's only going to get bigger.
So, I finally did my first...
You had your first couple matches?
Well, I had the tutorial, and then I had my first couple matches where I just got crushed, so...
So who are you fighting against? Which NPCs did you go after first?
The ones that were right
User
Right
disconnected
of
from
the-
your channel.
the person you learned from.
Because I remember when I first went in there, it was like you weren't supposed to challenge. You were like the tutorial guy, but like the next guy that seemed logical was the wrong one. So you might want to look.
Elmer the King is the last one you want to do.
Next, yeah.
No, I don't think it was him. I remember, like, the person that I did put, like, a Hildebrand card down and just all these, like, high-value cards. And I'm
Okay, the two that you want to challenge first are the ones that are closer to the door out. That would be Jonas of the Three of Spades or something, and then there's a Roganin right next to the Cactpod board, or the Triad board. You want to challenge those two NPCs first. Those are the two weakest NPCs in the game, next to the starter NPC. So take on those guys, and that'll get you started. And your best bet for a resource after that is you want to go to XIV or ffxivtriad.com, and you can look up the low-level cards, and you also get comments on each of those cards as to how difficult the NPC is and what kind of deck strategies you can use.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I played those two. Like, the one I drew against, I'm like, oh, good, I draw. The other one just, like, crushed me, like, completely. And I'm like, okay. And I entered my first Cactpot drawing, which I came in dead last for.
What was your payout?
Like 86 or something like that.
You made more than the Balmung server. With the early bird bonus, I only got 63.
Oh, okay.
That cloud card's not getting any sooner.
That's the only one you're missing, right?
Cloud and Bismarck, as I'm still trying to get people to stay in that damn fight.
That was my biggest problem with that fight, is nobody stays in that fight. You wipe twice and everybody's like, oop, I'm going, bye.
Have you tried the Chocobo racing yet?
No, I have not.
Yelta, have you?
Oh yeah, I've done quite a bit of chocobo racing. I haven't like bred any chocobos or anything, but it's I actually find that to be probably the most enjoyable activity in there. Okay, I do daily Cactpot. I actually religiously do that, but then chocobo racing is probably the next fun.
I think after I get all the cards, or at least after I get the cloud card for sure, I will probably be able to focus my MGP into starting chocobo racing, because I heard it requires a huge MGP sync to start.
I didn't really feel like I've only been racing casually though. I haven't been like buying all sorts of stuff. I buy the thing that makes the chocobo forget what it learned when it's not what I want it to learn, but I don't buy a lot of food. I really do it pretty casually.
Wait, hold on, 1 second. So you're telling me one of the co-hosts for the Chocobo Dash podcast doesn't do chocobo racing?
I haven't done it yet, because the freaking cloud card is 1 million MGP.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure there.
Once I have that card and I don't have to worry about that huge MGP mountain that I have to climb, then yeah, I'm going to probably focus on doing more of the chocobo racing.
Good. Well, we don't have that much time today because we're trying to fit in 2 podcasts actually within the next 2 hours. So let's get right into the meat and potatoes of the podcast. Who here is familiar with the hero's journey?
I am. I had to study that in university.
I am not.
Yeah, I think we touched on it in school.
It's basically the journey that every hero takes from the beginning of the adventure to the end. That's correct, right now?
Pretty much. It's basically not so much an outline, but more of a guidepost to how stories for adventures seem to all be written.
Since you know the most about this, how about you lead us off and like the because I know there's 12 different things to go to, like almost the guide. Can you let us know what those are?
Certainly. It starts off with the ordinary world, the call to adventure, the refusal of the call, meeting with the mentor, crossing the threshold, test allies and enemies, the approach, the ordeal, the reward, the roadblock, the resurrection, and the return with the elixir. Now, if you apply this to pretty much any story, you will actually find that a majority of them follow most of these steps, if not in direct order, but in a very close order. And I'm actually going to reference a game that's an indie title that some of you may have heard of. Has anyone here heard of an indie game called The Journey, or just Journey?
Yes.
I have. Yes.
That is a literal interpretation of this story. Literal, as in, like, everything you try to do in that course of that game is literally the hero's journey, including the one part that people generally don't think about. Step 3.
The refusal?
Yeah, because most people, you think, oh, well, it's a video game, how are you going to refuse the call? Well, what do you think most people are going to do, in all seriousness? Do you think they're all going to charge ahead?
Nope.
No, the majority of people that played Journey did the refusal to call on their own by simply trying to explore instead of going forward.
Now, this is kind of interesting because I actually started reading, well, kind of rereading, but I didn't really make it far into the series, the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. I don't know if anybody is familiar with those stories, but that follows basically, that seems like to be the journey that seems to go on in those books. So
I know, like, Star Wars, even if you, like, take the Star Wars movie, that's, like, a universally accepted, you know, it hits most of them. You know, you have the ordinary world, and, you know, Luke wants to get off Tatooine, and, you know, and he meets Obi-Wan.
that is true. So now, the reason we're talking about this is, you know, how does this fit into, like, Final Fantasy XIV? Because we got this story going on, which is an epic journey, an epic story, but how does our heroes fit into the hero's journey as it pertains to, you know, the hero's journey, I guess?
Well, your call to adventure is essentially when you first go to sign up to the Adventurers Guild. Then your refusal to call is when people run off and explore the map and explore the area without actually trying to progress the main storyline. Meeting with your mentor is actually going through with the main storyline. Crossing the threshold is when you actually start down the major story arc for the main storyline. I would say that using Ulda as an example, you actually hit step 5, the crossing the threshold, when you meet Thancred and you get your first crystal of light.
So that'd be like if, because I went to Limsa Limosa first, so I met Y'shtola first, so that would be the same.
Yeah, when you had that encounter and then you ended up getting your crystal of light, it would be about the same. And I'm assuming Papa Limo and Ida for Gridania?
Yep, it follows the exact same pattern.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, then you have your tests, allies, and enemies. That's basically you joining the Scions. The approach is where you and the Scions start to gather together and get ready to challenge the Garleans. The ordeal is when everything starts to go terribly wrong during the storyline. Basically when the Garleans invade the Waking Sands, killing a lot of the members. The reward is when you finally get everyone back together The roadblock is about probably say would be about the point where you see that Thancred has been taken over by La Habrea. The resurrection is the final confrontation between us, Gaius, and La Habrea. And the return is the escape from Castra Meridianum.
No, that's actually kind of really interesting to actually just see how that all works out there.
Now, as for it applies to after that point, it's really, really difficult to see because it seems like we're in a constant cycle between steps 7 through 12.
Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good thing and a bad thing because it seems like it's just constantly upping the ante without us actually getting a chance to really rest and have the story, recenter the focus, because there's no longer like really a call to arms as much as it's a recall to arms, so you have no real reason to refuse that call anymore.
Okay, so what does everybody think about this as a storytelling device for the game? Does this make it better, or is it actually making it... Or do you think if we would have went a different way, the story would have been better?
I kind of feel like maybe this is just the running theme for any type of fantasy, not limited to Final Fantasy or video games. I mean, you can compare this to any kind of fiction or movies, books, TV shows. So I don't necessarily think that there's anything wrong with following this methodology, and it's a safe bet. And maybe shying away or going away from this method is maybe a little bit too risky.
I wouldn't say so much it's risky as much as it's really difficult to do. A good example to point out is this has been around a very, very long time. You can take this 12 steps and apply it to the Odyssey and the Iliad from Homer.
Pretty much as long as we've been telling stories. Pretty much as long as we've been telling stories, that follow these 12 steps, or most of them. I mean, Final Fantasy does a thing that I know a lot of, like, especially, like, episodal things do, or once in a while they'll come by and they'll, like, strip you of all your powers. We did that in Final Fantasy. But, it's always kind of like, oh, and now there's a bigger bad guy and a bigger bad guy. But a couple times they try to humble you. They send you to Ishgard. Now you don't know anyone. And now you have to build up trust again. Maybe you have to make some more sandwiches.
Yeah, at least this way is better than freaking Metroid, where every time you start up the new Metroid, suddenly you have no power-ups, despite the fact that you left the last one with, like, more weapons than God.
Yeah, I actually thought of Metroid when I was saying that, because I know there's a couple games where they're like, oh, your suit is basically ruined. You have to find it, power it all up again, or whatever.
No, how does this, because I know in our sidetracks we're going to be talking about more specifically MMOs and stuff like that, but how does this game compare to, like, other MMOs when it comes to using the hero's journey? Like, I know a lot of them don't really have that much storyline.
I would say that, 14 does a decent job of using the hero's journey as a building block. It doesn't focus on it. The Old Republic, having played 3 characters through the main storylines on that before, that one heavily, heavily draws from this.
Now, would it be because of the movies that it's based upon, or...?
I think it's a combination of the fact that the movies are heavily based on it, and the books are heavily based on it, and the original 2 Star Wars games, Star Wars The Old Republic games, were based on it. So I feel that they kind of wrote themselves into a corner, so to speak, and it just, the style was there, it was good, it's just, and you look at it from the perspective of, is it different from this? No, it's not even close. But if you look at it from, was it a good story from 1 to 50? Yeah, it was a good story. Also, hi Lunavox in the chat.
Yes, hello. the reason that we're actually talking about this is because, one, there's no real news that came out at all, and I think this is actually an interesting subject to talk about, especially when you consider the lore, of the game. And like you said, I don't think they really do a lot to... I mean, most of the time we don't even think about the hero's journey as you're progressing in this game.
It kind of makes me wonder though, like, and just to always bring it back to what I usually do of how people's minds work. You have to think about the base reason why all of these things exist. Why does the hero's journey exist? Why do we see this theme repeated so often throughout any media that we've chosen to consume throughout a good period of time? And I think that has to deal with the human need for accomplishment and fulfillment, and I just think that this is something that's very constant in our lives, is to always that want to achieve, to strive, to struggle, achieve, and to in a sense redeem yourself or make a name for yourself. And I don't think that that's something that's really going to change. I think that we're going to continue to see something like this well beyond the time that I can even conceive, because I think that this is something that's very ingrained just within human nature.
Well, I mean, and if you think about MMO players especially, we want to, part of us wants to escape the ordinary world. That's kind of part of the goal. We want to have adventures. We want to have other people see us for, how special we are. We want to be, we want to, pass tests and fight enemies and make allies. So I think that especially for MMO players, we want this. We want to experience the hero's journey.
Not to mention, the hero's journey is a very relatable story type, in the fact that it's an average person who's basically called into greatness. That means you, me, somebody down the street, anybody could become a hero by following essentially this hero's journey. It's incredibly relatable, and as such, it's incredibly well loved.
Now, is there any way to... Because I know you say it's well loved and everything, but if this story was not written with the hero's journey in mind, would the story be as good as it was?
I want to argue no. I mean, okay. Have you guys ever experienced something, whether it be video games or movies or a book, where you read it and you watch it and you get to the end and you're not fulfilled because it didn't follow this hero's journey methodology? So I think that if it didn't follow this journey of, I would argue, of fulfillment, I don't think that it would have been as satisfying, to me at least personally.
I feel personally it probably would have been a lot more confusing and difficult to follow, because at least this way it's kind of like a wave. It builds up, it builds up, it builds up, then has the breaking point, and then it comes down. It brings everybody back down to the moments of peace before it brings us back up into another wave towards the next conflict.
Well, I think doing it this way, writing the story this way, satisfies the most people, and that's very much, SE has all been about safe calls and, satisfying the majority. So I think if they didn't follow this pattern, it would have probably dissatisfied a lot of people who were expecting these, 8 of 12 of these or something to exist. Even if they could have done it, I don't think the game would have been as successful had they done it, because too many people expect this.
Even if they don't realize they're expecting it.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the question that I was going to kind of bring forward was, I really honestly think that this is what people want. this is, yeah, okay, it's the same thing we've done over and over again, but this is what feels good. This is what feels good. You get that sense of accomplishment, the completion of the journey. And I don't necessarily feel like there's anything wrong with that, and I think that I probably wouldn't continue to play it if I got all the way to the end and it didn't fit this methodology. I think that maybe I'd be a little disappointed, and I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, you know what, I'm okay with it being the same thing that it's been before.
I'm trying to think of examples of, especially MMOs, MMORPGs. I'm trying to think of an example that doesn't really follow or at least hit on. So I'm kind of failing at that. Almost, even a lot of the shooters I play kind of pull you through this whole, you somehow got out of the ordinary world, whether you're a hero stranded, across enemy lines or something, and it still follows that pattern. I'm trying to think of an MMO especially that doesn't.
I don't think there's one MMO that does, to be completely honest, in some way, shape, or form.
I can't think of anything either. I can think of some other media, television series and movies that have ended and kind of strayed from this hero's journey, and you always hear it. I was so pissed with how it ended, or that really wasn't how I expected it to go, and now you just wasted 8 seasons of my time. Way to go.
No, the examples I'm going to probably throw out are probably like the worst examples of not following is because I don't think they really have a story per se. But games like probably like Ragnarok Online doesn't follow it, but then again, they really don't have a story per se.
You can't really apply that to Korean MMOs because Korean MMOs are designed to be a grind, not to be a story.
Okay. So I'm trying to think of an example of an MMO that doesn't, and I'm actually kind of failing at the moment. Does World of Warcraft does this at all?
Oh yeah. Are we going with following the RPGs? Because if we're not following RPGs, there's games like it just slipped my mind. Some of the fighter games, I guess. Dust, I think it might have been called. It was a game that you could download through the PlayStation Store. It was free to play for a weekend or two, and it was just a fighting game. And there was no depth, there was no story behind it. God, can anybody help me complete my line of thought here? Because it's just not coming together.
No, I've never heard of it.
And I was going to say, most fighters have characters that do follow this archetype, though. This,
right,
I guess, trope.
Yeah, and my argument on that was, I tried this, and I'm not going to have to figure it out, and when I look it up and I remember what it is, I will make sure to tweet it out. The game was just, you just go in and you just fight each other, and that was that. And I just kind of lost interest because there was no backstory. Even in Halo or Call of Duty or Battlefield, there's always the single-player story there to play before you go into multiplayer, so you still have that background of the hero's journey.
I would say to counter that Dust game, though, from the opposite spectrum, one that follows this storyline really, really well, I've found, has been the Blaze Blue series, specifically following Ragna as the hero for that storyline.
Never even heard of that, so I'm sorry, I got no comment.
Okay, it seems like Neobori is saying that any of the sandbox MMOs like Eve, Dust 514, etc.
Yeah, a lot of the sandbox games don't give you. There's no real. There's not that overarching storyline anyway. Much less any hero's journey. I mean, I play a lot of like Ark or Rust or
absence of story doesn't necessarily mean it's immune to hero's journey. It just means that they've decided not to include any story whatsoever.
Yeah, so that's probably more of a lack of story than a... I'm not sure.
Like, we're trying to think of ideas for like games that have used a story but don't follow this path.
Mario.
Not necessarily. No, because your princess... It does. Your princess is always in another castle. Always. So it's going on through that path. I can tell you right now, Mario and the hero's journey, he's got one. He really does. Now maybe Mario Kart, not so much.
Well, I mean, you got to look at it this way, okay? He's got the Call to the Adventure, but he doesn't really have, refusal to call.
Yes, he does.
Really?
I'm going to use World 1-1 as an example. Okay? Mario 1, World 1-1. You want to know how I can tell you the refusal to answer the call? Pipe 3.
Pipe 3?
Pipe 3 is your first pipe that you can take a deviant route from the main path.
Yes.
Still refuse to... Yeah, you can refuse not to do it. Go straight for the princess.
Yeah, you can. Touche.
Okay. So even in a game like Super Mario, this is actually probably what we should be talking about in our sidetracks episode. But here we are. But even a game like Mario has this overarching trope, I guess. Can we call it a trope at this point?
I would say it's very much a trope, if not like a loose structure to build a lot of story with. I'd say it's a framework for stories, not so much like a guideline, but a frame.
I think it's a framework for life. In general, the hero's journey was created because of the way that we are as human beings. I think the hero's journey is something that fulfills us, and I don't think it's a bad thing.
Okay, so I've got one more question before we move on to something else, because like I said, our time is kind of allocated, and I don't want to try to push this 3 hours or whatever. If Final Fantasy XIV will not have the story that follows this, this trope, and basically fell back to a lot of sandbox MMOs where they don't have really any story, would the game be as popular and as good as it is?
I'm going to flat out say no.
I second that. Absolutely not. I don't think that it would be the same at all.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with no also.
Okay, so this is a very important thing that a lot of people don't think about when they're playing games, but at the same time, if you're missing it, it does make itself abundantly apparent that it's not there.
I am very much a sci-fi / cyberpunk style geek, to be fully 100% full 100% disclaimer. But I would choose Final Fantasy XIV over Eve just because of the fact that there's an amazing storyline. Even though in Eve I could do like cyber augmented parts and pilots and stuff.
That right there? True. Yeah, that right there is why I didn't stay with Eve.
Okay, not the episode that you thought this was going to be, right, Yelta?
No, I expect nothing and everything.
Okay. The next thing we're going to go into is a little segment that we call... Hold on, let me cue up the music here. Well, technical difficulties.
Dun dun dun.
Okay, we call this next segment This Eorzean Life. We
love it.
Each week we go through the lore of the game and bring something that you probably never even heard about. And coming to this week, I did not know what we were going to be doing for lore. So I asked my fellow co-host what kind of lore everybody wanted to basically go through. And now had a really good suggestion. I did not know this because I didn't even do the storyline from 30 to 50 for the Dark Knight, so I didn't know how deep this storyline was.
This is probably, as I've said it before, and I will say this again, this is probably the deepest, most amazing, well-written story for any job in this game I have played to date.
Well, thank God, because some of them were underwhelming.
The 30 to 50 storyline for this job class, I'm going to tell people right now, if you're listening and you haven't done this and you want to do this, this section is going to contain spoilers, and I'm going to spoil the living crap out of this. So you have been warned now.
Oh, I have to mute you guys for a little while. I haven't leveled it yet, and I just can't know. So I'm going to skip those notes. I'm going to skip this part. I'm going to be back, but I just can't spoil it for myself. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. This goes to anybody. If you don't want it spoiled, I guess jump ahead about 10-15 minutes maybe.
I could probably do all the spoiler stuff in the first 5 to 10 minutes, so jump ahead about 10 minutes.
Okay. Well, Yelta, have you done the Dark Knights?
I have not, but I'm willing to take it.
Alrighty, well, now since you're the expert on the Dark Knight here, why don't you lead us through this lore?
Okay, you first get to Ishgard, and you end up encountering an NPC who tells you that there was a brawl that happened in the arena between a man with a large two-handed sword and I believe it was 2 Temple Knights. They tell you that they've thrown him in the broom because his injuries were so bad that they were expecting him to die, but they didn't really care much because he was a heretic, essentially, because he was basically killing Temple Knights. Basically, you get to that person who's lying slumped against the wall. You find his soul stone lying on the ground, and you hear something. Now, I'm going to point blank say at this point, this is by far and above the most powerful soul stone that we have encountered in the game. Other soul stones just basically give you the access to these abilities, give you access to the powers that job has. This is the first soul stone that interacts with you. It channels your character's inner self, inner thoughts, inner feelings, and personifies them, reanimating the corpse of Frey. This corpse is then your teacher from 30 to 50 without you realizing it. And your ultimate level 50 fight is coming to terms that Frey is you, and your dark half has to be defeated and brought into submission before you succumb to the darkness.
Yikes.
The writing for this was incredibly subtle. Each time I went through the storyline, like each time I went through one of the quests, little tips, little hints, little fragments of knowledge that Frey should not have known were being said, were being line dropped. Grammatical errors that made no sense at the time, like I should have let Leviathan drown you. Frey wasn't at Leviathan, so I thought, oh, well, maybe that was a typo or something. But the line that seals the deal is in that level 50 quest. When you find out that Frey has basically assaulted a bunch of Temple Knights who were basically trying to help, and they wanted you to disarm before you get in there, and Frey's immediate statement to you before you even walked in there and talked to him was, surrender our weapons. After what happened in Ul'dah, they must be mad.
Interesting.
And that's when Frey takes off the helmet, shows that Frey is actually you, and then you have to fight yourself. And the more damage you take will create more copies of yourself.
Wait, what?
Your sorrow is one copy. Your grief is another copy. Your pain is another copy.
That's pretty cool.
Okay, I'm gonna make a joke here, and hopefully none of my Dark Knights listeners will get too offended. But is this why the class is considered emo?
No, the powers of darkness in this case are negative emotions. It's what draws on your inner anger, your inner rage, your inner, for lack of a better term, your inner darkness, the side of yourself that you generally don't show to other people. And the fact that Frey spent the entire storyline up to from 30 to 50 basically saying not only your thoughts as the character, but your thoughts as the player on a lot of subjects. It gives more depth to the player character than any other quest in this game. You find out more about how your character actually thinks than anybody else tells you throughout the course of the game. And what this Dark Knight storyline told me is that your character just wants to stop. Your character is tired of saving the world, tired of saving everybody else, and just wants to stop.
Refusal of the call.
Alright, I will let Demi know that she can come back in.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that also harkens back to, our first discussion here that's, about the refusal of the call. Here we get perfectly situated that we don't want to do this anymore. So, yay.
But yeah, seriously, this storyline was absolutely stunning to me, and I keep telling people all the time, if there's any one storyline quest you have to do, it's this one. Even if you have no intention of taking tank any higher than 50, just get the quest done and just be blown away by it and then retire the job if you really, really want. But it is worth seeing that 30 to 50 storyline. It is worth seeing so much.
So, how's the storyline for Dark Knight from 50 to 60 then?
I'd say probably about average with everything else. It's good. It's fairly well written, but it's not as impactful as the 30 to 50. That 50 moment cemented things for me as loving the class, and afterwards it kind of felt like, okay, here's a continuation of the story from this from a new trainer kind of thing, and it's like, okay. But the new storyline's not bad, it's just not to the same caliber, I would say.
Okay. Moving on, we're going to talk about the minion contest that we had for the past month, and there's a little problem with everything. One, we're supposed to do it last week on last week's podcast, and we did it because I totally forgot about it. This week, I didn't forget about it. However, I couldn't find the file that had all the submissions, so please don't hate me another week.
Alright, if that's the case, then we should probably give out a prize for a secondary place just for the wait.
Okay, I do agree with that.
I will pitch in and we'll give a minion on the Mog Station to second place.
Okay, that sounds awesome. I do apologize. We will definitely have this sorted out next week. Even if I have to go, because I know all the application or all the screenshots were sent to us through Twitter, so I have if I can't find it, I could just go through Twitter and just grab them all. So, I do apologize, people, but I'm only human.
You should replace more organic parts with machines.
Probably should. Yelta, you guys had a screenshot contest, right?
Yeah, we just recently, I think the last episode, announced our winners. Gosh, that was fun. I just can't wait to have another contest now.
We didn't get a lot of submissions for ours, but the ones we got were amazing.
I think about half of ours might have been free company members. That's why we had to be very careful and get a non-14 player to be our judge. So that it was our mother, my career and my mother. And she sat there and went through every picture over and over again.
That sounds like a legit and fair way to have it solved.
Yes.
I agree with that. I think that's perfect.
So, next week, without fail, we will have a winner and a secondary winner. But please don't hate me.
Oh, no, I don't think anyone's going to hate you. I mean, they'll be getting free stuff.
More prizes.
We already did.
Everybody always needs more stuff.
Fat loot. Alright, let's move on to the next section then.
Do we want to talk about this? Because we were supposed to talk about this a couple weeks ago. Do we still want to talk about sharing our stories about gaming?
I think that's make for a better side questing story, like side questing video.
This is true. We'll do it then. So, guess what? We've got email.
Isn't that the best feeling ever?
I know, this is like the 5th week in a row that we've had like email, so I'm kind of ecstatic.
I say the feeling of us getting email is better than me opening Amiibo.
Did they like go to like a paper Amiibo now or something like that?
We'll talk about that on the side quest.
Oh, okay.
Alright, are we ready?
Yep. Did you want to talk? Did you want to read it?
If you guys can hear me loud and clear, I will do it.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Hello, Whispering Dawn. This is Next Step Badger, or at Next Step Plays, as you might know me on Twitter. I just want to say that I'm honestly proud to know all of you. You all bring such wonderful commentary to the community. As someone who suffers from depression and struggles with that and a few other issues, listening to this podcast is one of the things that always brings a smile to my face. Thank you. Now, to the topics at hand, I'm not the most amazing white mage, but I would like to offer my view on things in Alexander and the like, and per your last episode, I'm inquiring about lending my voice to the conversation. Otherwise, I was actually curious about one thing. Do you all think the current Trinity stands as the best thing for the game? Or should they branch out into adding a support-specific class or two in the future? I know there has been earlier rumor of Yoshi P wanting to change the combat systems and such in a drastic fashion. Maybe even get rid of the classes and move into a job-specific leveling system, much like Dark Knight, Astrologian, and Machinist, where there are no base classes to access your job crystals. Some of the events in Heaven's Word seem to be lending a bit of credibility to that, in my mind too. The event in the White Mage questline, where one of the twins decides to go beyond the forest and spread the knowledge and investigate the taint in Heidelin, for instance. This would open the idea of white mages coming to the world without the need for a conjurer to discover the old magic once more, as your Warrior of Light did in the main storyline. Do you all think it would be a good change for them, for the game, and allow more openness to the job system? Thank you for reading the email. Thank you for sending it. I look forward to your next podcast with eager anticipation. Much love and respect. Next Step Badger, Warrior of Quez, of Excalibur. The end.
NSB, thank you very much for the amazing email.
That
Yes.
made my heart smile. Thank you so much.
Yes, we have some great conversations with him on Twitter, and if we can get back into playing Ragnarok online with him, that'd be awesome too. So, but as for your question, so what does everybody think about how the current Trinity stands?
The Trinity is a very hard thing to break once it's implemented into a game. I feel that the unfortunate side effect would be, unless the support class is buffing the party or nerfing the mobs enough to make up for another DPS, then the raid community is not going to take that person over a DPS.
It'd be hard to balance in the current structure of the game, that's true.
If they make it so that way it's more effective to have this support class than a DPS, they're going to stack up as many as support classes as possible. And if they make it so that way it's underwhelmed compared to a DPS, they're not going to take it because the DPS would do more.
You know, I don't know if anybody else ever played DC Universe online, but my husband and I did for quite a while, and there was, you know, dedicated roles for essentially controllers who were needed to fill your power gauge. These were people that were there to fill your TP bar, more or less. Did anybody play that or has played it before?
I know what you're referring to. I haven't played it in. I didn't play it in DCU. I never played that, but that we did have something similar in Dark Age of Camelot, and we needed bards running around in order to keep not only our health up but our skills and mana up.
Right. So that's kind of what I feel like the bard and the machinist. Yoshi talks about it being a support class, but the thing is that they're still categorized as a DPS, but their DPS is that of a support class, and I think that not having these classes separated out into their own particular well-defined role while still able to do DPS just like a healer can, almost puts the players at a disadvantage, particularly players who main bard or main machinist, because a lot of times, you know, and if there's a DPS check, if you could end up getting two bards and a machinist and a dragoon, you're going to have a hard time meeting a DPS check because the system isn't designed to differentiate between a DPS and a support DPS. So I really believe that even if they did it on the back end, where when you go in and you queue up for something, that they manage to separate that out a little bit more, I think that the gaming community for Final Fantasy would benefit significantly from that distinction. I think it would balance parties.
Neo Bari says that support classes would work in a bigger group size. In 11, they had 6 people in a party, but it felt awkward in Rift, which had a support with a party of only 5. And considering that the average dungeon party in 14 is 4...
Well, I've always hated that 4-man party thing myself personally.
Me too.
I've played other games where I've played more supporting roles, and I think of 11 specifically. You play, you know, classes that have more supportive roles, and it's really fun. I actually really enjoy that. But to do that, you know, would they have to like pull some of the support skills away from the classes that already have them, or, you know, how do you get across that balancing issue that was mentioned earlier about, well, if it makes sense to throw a DPS instead of a support. Well, and that's why Bard is an unsatisfying position right now. It's still, people who played Archer wanted to be Rangers, and they made them Bards instead, and it really irritates a lot of people to this day, and I'm talking from like 1.0, you know. So if they could like create a home for a support class, I do think they would have to increase party sizes for sure.
Well, I argue that maybe they wouldn't, you know, and I hate to bring it back to you, and definitely a game that is not nearly as in depth and involved, at least in my personal opinion, as 14 is. It'd be easier to balance it out. I mean, I can see where the problem comes from, but I think that there's some tweaking that needs to be done to the party system, particularly in the way that DPS roles are filled while you're going through Party Finder, and particularly for like Savage raids. I think that having those roles, or even just in any kind of an 8-man or even a 4-man, I think they could benefit from having a little bit more of a distinction between Bard DPS or Monk DPS, because they're two different DPS classes, and each one has their own particular strengths and weaknesses that maybe it needs to be a little bit more thoughtfully implemented, if that makes sense.
I think they can actually do a support class if they do it the way they handled Astrologian. Because I think Astrologian is more of a support class than it is a healing class.
So make it more like a DPS that can switch between hard DPS and support buffs?
You're talking
Like
about
a-
a hybrid at this point.
Like a cleric type stance and a healer.
Wait. No,
No,
not
okay.
at all.
Okay,
With
so
Astrologian-
never mind. Never mind. I got what you're talking about. Okay, carry on.
To me, to have a good support class, they shouldn't be doing DPS at all. Now, I may be off base on this, but I think Astrologian is more of a support class with their cards, where they can give like buffs for attack. They can, do all the stuff that they can with their cards. MP regen, TP regen, stuff like that. The Astrologian can do while maintaining a healing facade, and it gives something that a healer right now, if they're not DPSing, they're just standing around most of the time. With Astrologian, if you're cycling through your cards, you hardly have any time to DPS, because you could be buffing your entire party, which is supporting them. At the same time, you do have some debuffs that you can throw on the enemy. It's, to me, a more perfect support class than a bard or, a machinist is at this point.
Well, and I agree with you. I think that maybe, and this to me has been a long-standing problem with 14, is that there isn't a distinction between one DPS from another when it comes to Party Finder and setting up a party. And I know that they've talked about or mentioned that at some point they may look into creating a distinguishment between those. And I think that I'm not sure that was even a word. I think it would maybe make it a little bit more difficult to get in and actually play, because they're looking for specific DPS jobs to fill X number of DPS slots. Does that make sense what I'm saying? That instead of them looking just for any DPS for those 4 DPS slots, they look for a melee, a caster, a quote-unquote supporter, and then an additional DPS in whatever role.
Well, if I understand correctly, today it attempts to find one melee DPS and one range DPS, but it doesn't differentiate between if it's a black mage or a bard. So, like, if maybe they added some more complexity into that and added, like, support roles. Is that kind of what you're saying? That they would add a...
Right. And see, like, I'm not saying that it's going to be an easy thing for them to implement into the game, but I think that it would really make the experience a lot better. To have the DPS roles more clearly defined when filling party roles.
But at the same time, like Nell said, if you're not making the supporting class, equal to, a DPS at this moment, people are not going to take them. You make them too good, then people is not going to be taking DPS. Therefore, if you do something like not even make a support class a DPS at all, and make it a healer, your healing classes should be your supporters. That's how I've noted in almost any other game a lot of MMOs I played, is that healing class is your main supporting class as well. Your DPS is there to do DPS. Your tank is supposed to be there to tank. Your healer is the one that's supposed to be putting the debuffs and buffing your party. And even in like Dungeons and Dragons, the Bard is a supporting class, but at the same time it can heal through its songs. It buffs through its songs. Clerics can as well as heal, they can buff and stuff like that.
I used to hate our bard in my D&D group, and I would use silence daggers on them all the time.
I think we might also have to have some more interesting content to them to even take something with support. Even if, let's say they made support classes perfectly awesome and fit well into the parties, all of our content, for the most part, let's just say doing a roulette, right? Everybody does their roulette, it seems like, and you go in there, and the only thing that matters is how fast you kill something. That's it. So I think you have to have content that is success is measured in more than how fast did I kill that pack of mobs for support to matter at all.
I actually agree with that a lot, too.
It's a very difficult subject to approach, and I think it's not like Yoshi doesn't want to do something like this. It's just it's going to take a lot more work to implement something that would actually be viable for the long run of the game.
Well, and I get the feeling too, though, that they think all of the players are too dumb to handle it. I get that feeling where it's like, well, that would be confusing. I brought up elemental weaknesses the other day and why would you want to make it more complex for complexity's sake? And there was just no talking to them. So there's a lot of the player base that the support classes would why not just kill things good? They don't want it to be more complicated than we have it today.
Well, that is a sad thing, but remember, the game is marketed and played by a large majority, and if that's what the majority wants, as much as it sucks sometimes, we have to deal with that.
Very true.
Now, how about the second thing about the job crystals and not needing base classes to use them?
I have a feeling that's what we're going to be doing from this point onwards, because the classes are a relic from the original 1.0 of this game. But now that we're moving on in 2.0, I have the feeling that we're only going to be getting job crystals from now on, and rather than starting off with classes. Whether we get them all at level 30, or if they're going to start at different levels, that's up to Yoshi and Co. But I'm pretty sure we're going to be class exclusive from here on out, or job exclusive from here on out.
Unless classes had some utility. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Yeah.
There's no reason to ever switch back to a class. So, in a perfect world, I always assumed that, you would maybe, like in 1.18, we would oftentimes take off our job stones and do content in the open world, all as classes, because there was a benefit. And then when we would, go in and fight Garuda or whatever, for the most part, everybody wanted your stones on because you wanted all the benefit for that. So, but right now,
I remember Ifrit was easier to kill with thaumaturges than black mages.
Yeah. There was outliers for sure. And, in at one time, the cross-class abilities were so free and open, basically everyone had to level up Paladin to get Sentinel, because you couldn't survive stuff otherwise. A lot of stuff's changed since then. I had always hoped they would go further with the classes and make the jobs more specific for, different content. But they've decided, I think, that classes have no utility, so why bother with it? And they're not even going to go the route of like Arcanist I really liked, because you leveled one up, and I basically, other than doing the job quests, I leveled one thing to 50, and I got a damage dealer and a healer out of it, and I thought that was kind of neat.
I have a major beef with the Arcanist, and I'm not saying that it's like major because my maiden through 2.0 was a scholar, so by default I did have a DPS on the other spectrum of the thing. However, that those Arcanist quests or skills either matched for one or the other, and it kind of got slippery when you're getting all this DPS stuff for your scholar, and you don't need them. And a lot of people that want changes to like the summoner are going back to spells like miasma and bio, saying that these spells need to be changed. Well, if you do that, then you're changing it on the scholar side as well, because they're co-opted into the Arcanist.
Yeah, they could have gone further with things like, not only do you get abilities, you also get, what is it, traits? Is that what they call them? They could have done some stuff where, think the abilities change based on traits work better. But they didn't. They dialed some of that in, I think. They could have done much more interesting things with that, but they didn't.
That's true. They could have done a lot of things.
I think that a lot of everything you guys said, I absolutely agree. But it really causes a problem when you want to do both. You want to run Scholar and you want to run Summoner. Setting up your, allocating your skill points as well. That puts you at a disadvantage because when you allocated your skill points, it runs off of that base class, not the job. So either you use those points for a healer or you use those points for a damage dealer, or you try to split them between the two. But either way, no matter what, in the end, that puts you at a disadvantage, or in the least, a really large inconvenience of having to constantly redo your skill points based upon the role you want to bring.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, they could have handled that differently too. They've even answered it, we're not fixing that, we wanted you to have to pick. And it's like, what? You let me switch with the Jobstone switch, but you want me to choose what I put my points into.
Well,
that's not fair.
Well, not only that, not just the points and everything, but a lot of, like I said, a lot of the skills, once you go into like even the high levels between like 40 and 50, some of those skills, as a scholar, I never even use. Because I'm like, why do I need this skill? It's a damage skill. I'm healing.
Like, it helps out a little bit to throw out DPS, but they should have added a mix of skills for both Scholar and Summoner as leveling up. That way, if you get a DPS skill one level, you get like the healing type skill the next. That way it still felt like you were balanced between the two. But it was very, very much like they designed Summoner, and then Scholar was kind of an afterthought.
I do agree with that. It does seem like the Scholar was an afterthought to the whole thing. But do you think it would be like show more openness to the job system if we do go with just the job crystals?
You know what? I think that I'd be okay with either not having it ever introduced at all. Now that it's been introduced with Heaven's Ward, I don't see any point in trying to go back to what we had before.
No, it wouldn't make any sense. They need to pick. They need to pick a direction and stick with it, even if it makes me unhappy. That's okay.
I think that they're sticking with the direction now, and the only reason they brought Arcanist out the way that they did is because the Arcanist guild was 1 in Limsa, and 2, Limsa only had 2 jobs to start the city with.
Well, now they have 3, so...
Yeah, I think I think going forward, yeah, they're going to stick solely to jobs.
I do too, especially since, that... And I do agree with you now that whether it be, what level, starting level, we don't know. But I really do think that the job crystals is what we're going to be seeing from here on out. I don't think there's going to be no more. I don't think there's going to be any more base classes.
But I hope not. Could you imagine having a level 1 to 50 and then 50 to 60? Just to start over at level 1 and then get to 30 and then have to take another class to 15 to get the job, take that job all the way up to 60. The grind from 50 to 60 is real.
That's the thing that always made me like not want. That's one thing that don't like about, because I want to go back and I want to level ninja. I want to level some of these other classes that or jobs that I'm interested in, but I don't want to grind another class to 15 just so I can get this class over wherever it needs to be.
That's why you gotta come over to my server and then I'll just power level you. Problem solved.
Well, it might be happening a lot sooner than what I think, so.
Hey, you're always welcome. Anybody's welcome. But we've...
I don't know, I made an alt there. Your people seem like really awesome.
They are, and you know what I really, really miss? Playing, and I don't know if I think you guys even mentioned my absence. I've kind of been in and out because of the physical injuries I have sustained over the last few weeks, and I really feel like a part of me is missing because I haven't been on to play my game.
Oh, I have friends who, get downright depressed. They couldn't get on and play with people, and part of it was the social aspect. Husband Negro. He stole my rum, guys.
Jerk!
But that's pretty important to have your game time.
Yeah, hanging out with my people, my friends, and leveling up my other part of me. It's missing, but hopefully soon. Hopefully soon, guys.
Okay, well, we're going to be wrapping things up here. Hopefully, we've said everything we could on this subject. We might actually talk about it later, because it seems like we do have a lot more to say about the whole Trinity thing. And I think it's a topic that we could probably get more in depth on a regular episode, maybe.
Oh, I'd love to hear more about it. I think that's really fascinating, and I think that there's something there that it's kind of an endless content discussion. I don't think that's something that we could ever really finish finding things to talk about in regards to that subject.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna start wrapping things up. You can catch us live every Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on twitch.tv Whispering Dawn. You can email us. Please email us, because we'd love to hear from you, especially on the subject. This is a fascinating subject for a lot of people, and please keep the emails coming. We love hearing from you every week, and it's nice to be able to read emails every week, so keep them coming.
You make my heart smile when you email us.
Yep. That's thewhisperingdawn@gmail.com. You can whisper us on Twitter at whispering_dawn. Facebook, facebook.com whisperingdawn. whisperingdawn.tumblr.com. youtube.com whisperingdawn. And you can catch us on iTunes and Stitcher. And if you do, please leave us a rating. It does help go support the podcast. And if you also want to support the podcast, you can give us some money over at patreon.com Whispering Dawn. That money goes towards the podcast and making it a much better experience, like we have experienced here today. We didn't have one single technical issue this week.
Well, I did, but that was before we went live, so they don't count, right?
Right. But no technical difficulties today, so yay for that. For those who are catching it for the first time, as we say goodbye, I don't get the last word here. these lovely ladies as my co-hosts and as our guests today. I do thank her for coming over from Gather Together. Why don't you say something about your podcast, since you didn't really get to say a lot of it earlier?
Oh, sure. The podcast I'm on is called Gather Together. You can find us on SoundCloud. Look for GTFFXIV. I think we're on Stitcher now too. I don't even know what that is, but my co-host Ruby did some magic. And if you're interested in me or anything I do, you can come find me on Twitter at Yelta Sumasu, YELTASUMASU.
Okay, and for now, I will say goodbye. And as the Wild Stallions said in the awesome Bill and Ted movies, be excellent towards each other.
Yes. Yes. So, I'm guessing I should say goodbye now too, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Alright, well, everybody, I will see you.
And this is Nell Celestine. You can always check me out at Nell Celestine on Twitter, twitch.tv/Nell Celestine. And I am currently buried up to my knees in Amiibo. Help, please.